Canada, again, next story. And there's some law to this. People who've been following this channel for long enough know, I mean, you should know, or you have seen at least recently. Once upon a time, I said I had a couple of red lines in the sand if things occurred in Canada, which would cause me to question my future in Canada and the province of Quebec. Vaccine passport, I think, was one. The other one for certain, forget what the first one was. The other one for certain was this bill called Bill 15. It wasn't called Bill 15 at the time, but it was the debate as to whether or not Quebec as a province, which typically is the not the canary in the coal mine, but is typically the catalyst for policy that spreads to other provinces. Quebec and Ontario, and then British Columbia, tend to influence the rest of Canada with policy. In Quebec, there was a discussion as to whether or not the government amends the Youth Protection Act to remove parental supremacy as the overarching principle, the overarching guiding the overarching guiding principle of the Youth Protection Act. And now, the idea is that the Youth Protection Act, which governs, the government getting involved in the case of abuse or, issues relating to children, parental supremacy was, until an amendment that passed in the dead of night during a pandemic, parental supremacy was the guiding principle. It was the overarching factor. Everything, that is done. The parent has the final say to some extent as to what's in the child's best interest. Now, obviously, and it doesn't need to be said, but apparently it needs to be said, this doesn't include, a parent saying, parental supremacy, I want to abuse my child, and therefore I determine it's in the best interest of my child and the government gets to say nothing. That's never what the concept was about. The concept was about protecting a parent's right to make parental decisions for their child. It was not to protect a parent from abuse where they say, yeah, I'm the parent, it's parental supremacy, piss off government. No. But what ended up happening is there was this tragic case of a young child that was abused and ultimately died of injuries after being put back into a home, which oddly enough, in this context, the adult that inflicted the fatal abuse was not a biological parent, but this child was put back into what was known to be an abusive household, was duct taped to a bed overnight, and apparently died as a result. Not apparently, sorry. The child died. And then the government says, how did this happen? Well, we put a child back into what we knew was an abusive environment with a parent who was not a biological parent. We need to make sure this never happens again. Well, we're gonna go ahead and amend the Youth Protection Act to eliminate parental supremacy. And now who's going to decide what's in the child's best interest? The government, the administrative state, the tribunals, whichever officer is put on a case of alleged child abuse. They said they amended the code to remove parental supremacy in Quebec. Bill 15, just recently, it was I don't know if it was a year ago now, I've lost track of time, but it was within the last year. And I said, that's the floodgates. We are now in a situation where parents no longer decide what's in the best interest of their child. How is this going to be problematic? Gender transition therapy, for example. Right now, we've only had cases where there's been a disagreement among parents as to gender affirming therapy, whatever it's called. Up until now, we've only had court cases involving parents fighting each other. Out of British Columbia, there was the case of one parent vehemently opposed to transition therapy for their 12-year-old daughter at the time. Mother wanted it for whatever, family dynamic, who knows why, whatever. Father vehemently opposed it. They went to court, and the court determined it's in the child's best interest that the mother get her way. And it led to serious problems. There have been many cases where it was parents disagreeing over the COVID shot. Many cases where the court ultimately came to the conclusion one parent's preference for the child trumps the other parent's preference, and the court decides this. There, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been a case yet, but boy, howdy, is it coming, where both parents were opposed to something that the child wanted. And then the court has to come in and say, who gets their way here? 12-year-old kid says, I want transition therapy. Both parents say no. Kid calls Child Protective Services, says, I'm gonna harm myself if I don't get this therapy. My parents won't let me. Government gets its claws in there, and they go to, it hasn't happened yet that I know of, but it's going to happen. And if it happens in Quebec, I'll tell you what's going to happen. The court is now going to supplant itself for the wishes of the parents. Pat Freedom says, not true. There is a case where the dad has been sent to prison for intervening in his child transition wishes. Pat, I don't know who you're talking to, if it's to me, but that's the case I'm talking about. The mother supported it. The father did not. They went to court and the judge agreed with the mother. That's not a case where both parents are fighting against the wishes of the child, but those cases are coming. I mean, it's just a matter of time for gender transition, vaccines, any other issues that a kid says, I want, and the parents who ought to have full parental supremacy say, no, you're a 12-year-old kid. We're your parents. When you get to be 18, do whatever you want. Until then, we're your parents. No. In Quebec, they passed the Bill 15. In Quebec now, the government is your parents. And what's happening in British Columbia now? The article has been updated, so I can't get the original, but just check this out, people. Here. So this is what the article originally said. Let me see something here. Just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing. Yeah, we got it. Okay. Amber Alert issued for 3-year-old boy last seen in Vancouver. I read that headline coming out of CBC News. Okay. My immediate reflex, it's a custody battle gone ugly. A parent who didn't have custody or didn't want to give the kid back at the end of visitation took off. You know, that the majority of Amber Alerts, as far as I understand, are actually one parent abducting the child, not like total strangers off the street. So I read that, it's like, okay, it's probably just an ugly divorce. One parent doesn't want to give the kid back or whatever. Then I read the second line. Boy was last seen at BC Children's Hospital at 4500 Oak Street in Vancouver. Then I'm thinking, oh, this is weird. Someone kidnapping a kid from a hospital. Okay, maybe it's not a parent. Then I go to read the article. Check this out, because this is no longer, I can't find this version anymore. Investigators believe he was taken by his mother, Jenina, described as an Asian woman with long black hair worn in dreadlocks. It's very interesting. I mean, no, so at the time of the abduction, I guess the mother had not yet been found. She's been arrested now, by the way. They're certainly going into a lot of descriptions that the media doesn't necessarily go into all the time when there's an accused, a suspect on the loose, but whatever. Describing her as, an Asian woman with dreadlocks. It might just be so that the public can identify her. It might also be to try to paint this individual as exactly what the media is going to want to depict her as. Listen to this, though. The mother, as far as we know, she was not deprived or denied custody rights of her own child. She was wearing a black jacket and a black toque, glasses, gray sweatpants, brown Uggs, and a striped messenger bag. She has a tattoo sleeve on her right arm. Police are warning the public not to approach the suspect, but to call 911 instead. Wow. Sounds like she's very, very dangerous by the looks of it. So I read this now. CBC, strike one. A child taken from a hospital by his mother. Strike two, there might be something more going on here. And then the warning, don't approach her. Oh, she's dangerous. Armed and dangerous with those dreadlocks. I tell the person who sent me this, there's got to be more to the story. And lo and behold, there is. And this is it. Now I'm going to pull up her video, her side of the story. Okay. And cover my ass, full caveat here. In as much as I know, this is her, in as much as I know the story fits together, it's impossible to get this out of here. It's impossible to make sure everything is 1,000% accurate. We live in bizarre times, and in as much as it's possible, this looks like the woman talking about the incident. Definitely fits the description. She looks totally armed and dangerous. Stay away from her. If you see, avoid her at all costs. Call the authorities immediately. A mother has taken her own child. This is her side of the story, and we'll go through it.
Hello, my name is Willow Sky, and I am currently in a battle with the ministry over the well-being of my child, and I would like a moment to explain to you what's going on.
Now, people are going to look at this and say, she looks a little hippie. Maybe, doesn't trust medicine. Maybe she should have her kid taken away from her. Maybe they should trigger an Amber Alert because she didn't want to. Well, she'll tell her story. Why would she have taken her kid from a hospital? And why would the government now be issuing an Amber Alert for a mother taking possession of her own kid? Then it makes sense. And it has to do with her not consenting or not necessarily wanting to put her son through certain medical treatments. Here's the story.
On Sunday night, the 11th, I received a phone call from my mother stating that she called an ambulance for my son, Pi, who broke into a high fever, which led him to have a seizure known as a febrile seizure.
Now, question I have here. Okay, her mother is watching her kid. Why? Maybe she did lose custody of her kid, but by the sounds of the story afterwards, it doesn't sound like that. Maybe she was out, I don't know, doing something and her mother was babysitting. I don't know. There's a question right there.
I was driving down from a camping trip and therefore was unable to be present for the incident. I returned home Monday at 2 p.m. and was contacted by Dr. Shane at the Surrey Memorial Emergency Pediatrics Center, telling me that my son's blood work.
By the way, everybody, she says she was camping, and I'm not calling anybody a liar. I'm just, as a lawyer, she might say she was camping. There might be something more to that side of the story in terms of custody or custodial rights. Don't know. From her own story right now, set aside the camping, and that's why I wasn't there. Her mother was watching her kid for whatever the reason. Okay.
May contain bacterial infection, and he will need a dose of IV antibiotics. We arrived, me, Pi, and his father, at around 7:30 p.m. to administer the intravenous antibiotic and left at around 11 p.m.
Thus far, though, it sounds like both parents have full custody over their child, and there's nothing like that going on. Kid gets sick, gets a massive fever, has a seizure, which is not good at all. IV antibiotics, according to the story.
During our visit, the doctor let us know that the bacteria known as Streptococcus pneumoniae was possibly found in my son's blood. However, the bacteria culture grew after 12 hours of my son's blood sample taken. The doctor informed me that there could be unknown contaminants such as bacteria on the skin that went in contact with the blood sample. We went home with some oral antibiotics as well, known as amoxicillin, and I followed the doctor's orders.
That's probably amoxicillin, I think. But anyways, IV antibiotics because it was a serious infection, and then oral antibiotics. Okay. And by the way, we'll get into the antibiotics. There's an argument, or there are people who say that antibiotics are being way overprescribed. But when a kid has a seizure because of a high fever and a blood infection, probably the time to take that risk, in as much as it is a risk.
The next day, Tuesday, they called us in for another appointment at 2:30 p.m., this time at the Child's Health Center for a checkup. We arrived and waited for a while.
So they willingly go back to the hospital, to the clinic. They willingly take their kid back for medical follow-up.
Dr. Hirsch came in and told us that Pi has possible bacterial infection in his blood, but they need to know if it's attacking my son's brain, causing meningitis. At this point, my son looks and feels completely healthy. No fever, no coughs, no runny nose, energy levels high, and he's been eating just fine.
Now, irony is that she says, kid's healthy, kids no cough. So you're going to hear the kid coughing in the background. The internet is astute. They pick up on everything. You'll hear it.
Dr. Hirsch then proceeds to give us the options. A, let them perform a lumbar puncture spinal tap to remove fluids from his spine to see the health of his brain cells, and then administer 10 days of IV drip into his system. Or B, get him on a 14-day IV drip of antibiotics. He says to me, all this to be done starting tonight. I'm in shock at the severity of the solutions presented.
Now the story starting. You can reconcile this version of events with the story run by CBC.
As I look at my healthy, happy son and their incohesive blood work tests, and I reply, no, we will not do that. Dr. Hirsch then looks at me and says, if you refuse this treatment, I will have to report you to the child ministry, and they will file your response as neglect to your child's health. My heart drops.
We can skip a little. I don't want to keep going through this here, but
and make an informed decision. Start the procedures. I talk to the head physician of the pediatrics, and he would walk me through all procedures to ensure I feel comfortable with everything. But now the head of the ministry is on the speaker telling me I need to stay and start the procedures. I politely say no because I told them I wanted to wait until I get back the blood test from today and make an informed decision. She says to me, we will be sending enforcements to take your child to give him the medication he needs. Call your lawyer. I hold in all the tears, all the anger, just so I could make it out with my sanity. Is this really happening? Visions of my crying son being ripped out of my arms fill me. It only takes them 2 hours after to send more social workers with police officers knocking at my door, searching to remove my son from me and infringe on our medical freedom. And just hours earlier, I had taken my healthy and happy son to the park where we enjoyed a box of pizza.
well, you hear him coughing in the background.
That my son is healthy and with no choice. And now I'm here living in fear about the future of my son. I will face these people again on Saturday morning.
So, but this is it. I mean, bottom line, that's her version of events. They tell her to kid's sick. They don't know what type of infection it is. They want to do a spinal tap. And a spinal tap is not a nothing procedure. I mean, it's just so we know. You know, it's not just a rock band or a mock rock band. Where is here? Lumbar puncture spinal tap. A lumbar puncture spinal tap is a test used to diagnose certain health conditions. It's performed in your lower back in the lumbar region. During the lumbar, a needle is inserted into the space between two lumbar bones to remove a sample of cerebrospinal fluid. This is the fluid that surrounds your brain and spinal cord to protect you from injury. Okay, it's done for testing for infections. Everybody knows that. Risks. Although lumbar puncture is generally recognized as safe, it does carry some risks. Post-lumbar headache. 25% experience headache due to fluid leaking into nearby tissues. The headache typically starts several hours, up to 2 days after the procedure, and may be accompanied by nausea, vomiting, and dizziness. Headaches are usually present when sitting or standing. Back discomfort or pain. Bleeding. Bleeding may occur near the puncture site or rarely in the epidural space. Brain herniation. Increased pressure within the skull due to a brain tumor or other space-occupying lesion can lead to compression of the brainstem after a sample of cerebrospinal fluid is removed. To prevent this rare complication, a computerized tomography scan. I never knew that's what CT stand for. Okay. Excuse me. A computerized tomography scan or magnetic resonance image is often performed before a lumbar puncture to look for any sign of space-occupying lesion resulting in increased intracranial pressure. It's not a nothing procedure. And then this just goes back to the basic questions. I think we can appreciate what is going on. Amber Alert issued because she took her kid from the hospital because she ultimately decided, I don't want my kid going on 14 days of antibiotics when I think the kid's fine and, maybe a little bit of a cough. Certainly don't want a spinal tap. And the state has said, if you say no to the doctor's recommendations, we know what's best now. And we're going to say that you're kidnapping your own child, issue an Amber Alert. She was arrested. Hold on. She was arrested. Where's the article? Police cancel Amber Alert from the CBC. 3-year-old's mother has been arrested. Vancouver police say a 3-year-old boy who was the subject of an Amber Alert late Monday was found near Calgary on Tuesday morning. Police believe the child was taken from BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. A statement says that the 3-year-old is now receiving care and his mother has been arrested after they were both found near Calgary. The Amber Alert was canceled shortly after 6. In a statement late Monday, police say the boy was receiving treatment for a medical condition. Well, the mother seems to have explained what that medical condition was and what the treatment was, and this is, I'm not taking sides on this, and not because I'm fence sitting. I'm not taking sides because we can all agree on the black and the white of these examples. Like a case that has made it to court many times. That the typical, the reflexive example, Jehovah's Witnesses who don't believe in blood transfusions and a number of other medical procedures. When there's a minor that requires a blood transfusion, the courts have systematically come in and say, yes, the minor, we're going to override the parents' religious decisions or the religious preferences when it's life-saving for the child. When it comes to, I don't know, if we take certain examples of certain modern times, if the government were to come in and say, despite parental objection, we're going to come in and give a little jabby to a child, I think most people would agree that that's absolutely impermissible. And now we're sort of in a zone, in a gray zone, not knowing more details than this. If the kid is suspected potentially of having, not encephalitis, I forget what it was, a very serious brain swelling, brain infection. And the mother, who is not a doctor, says, I don't want to do the spinal tap and I don't want to do 14 days of antibiotics because antibiotics can upset your gut, yada, yada. Okay, now we're in one of those zones where more facts and whatever. But we're very quickly, in real time, getting to a concrete example where a mother says, no, I don't really want to do that medical, not urgent, not life-saving. Kid's not in a seizure. Kid, apparently, if we believe the mother, doesn't even have fever anymore, but it could come back, and it could come back with a vengeance. We're in a situation now where a doctor is making recommendations for a serious invasive procedure, which is the spinal tap, or arguably a serious procedure, which is 14 days of IV antibiotic drip, which a parent might say, look, I don't think it's necessary. We'll come back in a day or two if the situation gets worse. But a doctor says, no. Remember, when I recommended it, it wasn't a recommendation. It was an order. And if you don't do it, government's coming in, literally taking your kid away from you, literally subjecting them to the medical procedure that you objected to, and literally arresting you. And now I want to know what people think of that. I'm not on the fence in terms of sitting on the fence. In this case, I agree on the black, I agree on the white, and then, for everything in between, you'd have to find out. A parent's decision to not get glasses for their kid who has eye issues because they, for whatever the reason, I won't make up might be a bad example, but parents exercising their parental rights capriciously to damage their children. I think, let's say the kid needs glasses. Parents say, I don't like glasses. I don't want them. Not getting my kid glasses. Not life-threatening, not life-altering, not an emergency, but I could understand a court saying, no, I'm sorry, kids getting glasses despite parental objection. But this one's interesting. And I have seen firsthand in life and, anecdotally, doctors prescribe antibiotics reflexively. It's sort of, actually, let me see if I can find something to substantiate my claim. I think it's a well-known thing that antibiotics are overprescribed. Antibiotics overprescribed. I don't think I'm making... No, I'm not. Okay, CDC, here we go. Now, I'm not saying it's one of those cases, people. I'm just saying I thought I recalled having seen this. The CDC says, this is May 3, 2016, I doubt things have changed much, 1 in 3 antibiotic prescriptions unnecessary. New CDC data show large percentage of antibiotics misused in outpatient settings. Now, I don't know if this is outpatient, inpatient. I think at this point it's outpatient because the kid's out of the hospital. Anyhow, so that's it. It's a known problem. In fact, the antibiotics are so overprescribed that people are growing resistant to them. They're not doing their job properly when they're actually needed for things like staph infections and whatnot. So there's a legitimate question to be asked here. Is this reflexive 14 days of antibiotics? That's hefty. Not as hefty as a spinal tap on a 3-year-old. But anyhow, that's the situation. SC Britain says there was a JW case where the child didn't want the transfusions and the courts backed her. She ended up dying, but this mother gets into legal trouble. Geez. SC Brighton, I think that was a 14-year-old kid, right? That wasn't, I'm fairly certain I remember that one. That was a 14-year-old Jehovah's Witness who refused it and subsequently passed away. So I don't know if they said in that case, I don't recall if they said the kid is old enough to appreciate what they're doing. Let's just say a 7-year-old. I mean, fairly certain Britain that it was I'm fairly certain it was a 14-year-old kid. So I don't know if the age, maturity, deemed, what's the word that we're looking for? Oh, emancipation of the child. I don't know if the maturity of the child played a role in that decision, and I suspect it did. I suspect the decision would be much different for a 7-year-old who can't possibly contemplate the consequences of the decision. Rob A says, the state does not own your child. You have parental supremacy. Court order only can override that and must be under due process or it's civil rights violation. Oh, here they had their due process here. A doctor calling Child Protective Services because the mother didn't want to give her kid antibiotics. It might be a stupid thing, and maybe the kid's going to end up in the hospital 2 days later. But are they good? Is it then it is not emergency application, it's preemptive. And then does the government get to override parental consent for preemptive measures?